Okay, so real quick, I have to tell you something. I wasn't going to share this video. I wasn't going to upload it for two reasons. Number one is because for years I was sitting on this information and I didn't want to share it because if it got into the hands of someone who would abuse it, then it would be used for bad in the world and not for good. That's the first point, but that's not actually why I was not going to upload today. The reason why I wasn't going to upload this today is because I just spent, I don't know how long, recording this, all right? And I realized at the end of it, I had this piece of fluff somewhere on either one of my cheeks. When I was done, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, I just fucking dropped insane value, right? And I was thinking, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to chop this up, distribute it on social media. It's going to be perfect, you know what I mean? Because I put a lot of effort into these videos and stuff. You know, all this stuff is foreign to me and it takes a lot of hard work. And I'm doing this for you guys. So I get to the end and there's this fucking fluff on my face for the whole video. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have to record it again because of the piece of fluff. And then I said to myself, you know what? Fuck the fluff. The value is more important, right? The value is more important. Getting this information out there to you guys is more important than my face, okay? So you can laugh all you want at the little piece of fluff on my face, but what I would advise is notice it, forget about it, get a notepad and take fucking notes, because this is probably the best piece of business advice that you will receive. And it's the piece of business advice that, well, I didn't get the advice, but I had to figure out for myself that in an instant changed the trajectory of my business and my career as an entrepreneur. So yeah, I said, fuck it. Let's just share this shit anyways. I don't give a fuck about the fluff.
The show goes on!
Right. Let's talk about how to make customers actually come to you already wanting to buy, wanting to pay you full price without having to convince them, without bullshit sales scripts, and without having hesitancy from them when it comes to money, okay? The dream scenario. And what I'm going to share with you is the key variable and the biggest driver of profits, the biggest driver of demand, and the biggest driver that's going to increase the efficiency of your sales process. And most business owners, most business consultants have no clue where profit, demand, and efficiency actually stem from. They're actually busy focused on stuff that doesn't really move the needle at all. And that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to help you move the needle by 1% or 2% or grow your business by 10%. I'm talking about multipliers here. I'm talking about growing your business by 4, 5, 6, 700%. That's what I want to talk about. And typically when I bring this up in client meetings, by the end of it, they want to drop everything that they're working on and put all their resources into this. So if you have a business right now and you want to increase sales, you want people to take you more serious, you want to increase profitability, you don't want hesitancy when it comes to closing the deal, you want a smooth transaction, okay, you want to have a full pipeline, then you're going to want to stick around until the end of this. And this applies to every entrepreneur, whether you're B2B, whether you're B2C, whether you're product based, whether you're service based, this applies to you. So you're going to want to listen up, because if you don't, you're going to pay some guru more money for some bullshit tactic that's going to go outdated, and you're going to be left twiddling your thumbs. Okay, I'm not making this video for the good of my health. I'm making this video because I care about you. I care about that business that you're growing or that business that you're starting. I want to see you do well. So do yourself the respect, give me the respect, and listen up. And if you want to continue poverty pricing, if you want to continue with no demand, if you want to continue with hesitancy at the close, then just click away from this now. And you might be wondering, wow, he seems so confident in saying this. Why is that? Well, this is the exact information that I used to go from poverty pricing, having no demand, coming across as desperate, trying to convince people to do business with me, having to rely on stupid sales tactics that just made me hate what I was doing, and ultimately I ended up going nowhere, to building my outsourced CMO consultancy. It allowed me to hammer the competition. It allowed me to up the minimum investment required to work with us. In some cases, people paying us €20,000 in a single transaction, which is something that I would have dreamed about before and I would have never thought was possible. We multiplied our retainer fee by 6-fold. No convincing, no having to outreach to people, no coming across as desperate, but people coming to me wanting to buy, saying, hey, I want to work with you. That's what I'm talking about here. I'm bringing you the stuff that they talk about behind closed doors. Your guru mentors, I've been in the rooms with them. This is the stuff that they don't want you to know. This is the stuff that they don't teach you in the courses that you've probably bought, or what people put out for free online. In fact, the only time I've talked about this publicly was at a Capital Club conference when I was speaking on stage, and the people who actually took my advice and ran with it, I've seen the impacts on their business, and that's what I want for you. So I want you to think about this for a second. What would it look like for you if you implemented this in your business? If you increased profitability, if you increased demand, if you had customers coming to you already wanting to buy your stuff before they enter your sales process, so you didn't have to try convince them, what would that profit do for your business? Because ultimately that's what you want, right? That's why you got into business, to help people but to make a profit at the same time. Well, you certainly wouldn't be overworked and under rewarded like I was, right? What you would have is you'd have more time, you'd have more freedom, you'd have more income, and you probably wouldn't be carrying a lot of the stresses that are making you tired right now. So how did I discover this in the first place? Well, I was actually forced to figure this out. It's every entrepreneur's dream to have sky high demand, to be able to charge what they want, and be able to get the deals over the line easily. And I knew that if I couldn't do those three things, I'd never be able to build a profitable business, because when you think about it, they all need each other in order to be profitable. You could have the best and the highest prices. You could have a lot of demand, but you could have a terrible sales process. You could have a great sales process. You could have the highest demand, but you could have terrible prices. Or you could have a great sales process. You could have no demand, and you could have the best prices. I'm pretty sure I just done that for all three. Hopefully I didn't mix them up, but you get what I'm saying. You need all three. And I knew that if I didn't figure out how to do those things, well, I'd probably have to give up on my dream of building a business, and all the struggles that I'd went through for years, well, that would have all been for nothing, and I'd have to jack it in and probably get a real job, which is not good. And that's the reality that I faced in 2019, in 2020, in and around that time. Don't quote me on the dates, but I was poverty pricing. I had no demand. I was outreaching to people. I was coming across as desperate. I was begging them to do business with me. The sales were always a struggle. I'd have the lowest price and it would still be hard as fuck to get the deals over the line. And when you're doing business that way, you build a lot of hatred towards the industry that you're in. I used to love marketing, then I started hating it, because I was overworked, I was under rewarded, and I was thinking to myself, like, I'm doing all this shit and I'm getting nothing out of it. It was always a struggle. Nobody would take me serious, and it got to the point where I had no money left. I'd given all these fucking guys my monies for courses, for programs, that I was forced to figure this out, because number one, I'd learned my lesson. They're never getting my money again. And number two, I had no money even if I wanted to. Okay, so it forced my hand. And I realized that they had everything that I wanted. They had the demand. They could charge what they wanted. And they didn't have to convince me to give me their money. And the crazy thing is, they do a shit job and I'd still do it. So I said to myself, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Rather than listen to what they're telling me to do, because that hasn't been working, I'm going to look at what they're actually doing, because they have what I wanted and they're not telling me something. They made profit while I was broke. So it's better for me to reverse engineer what they're doing rather than listening to their bullshit. And that's what I did do. I started reverse engineering the fundamentals of profitability. And this isn't something that you can find in a mainstream book, because I'd been through all the fucking books in the business section of the bookstore. So what was my strategy then? Like, what could I do? Well, all I could afford was books, and I knew that the information was out there. So I said, okay, I've got to change up my strategy here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at books about CEOs of companies who experienced tremendous growth. Now, the thing is, most of these books, they don't have headlines saying, here's how to fucking make more profits, or here's how to acquire customers. But what I did say to myself was, okay, if I look at the biggest companies in the world, when they experienced their most growth, who was the CEO at the time? Well, maybe I could pick up memoirs or an autobiography about their life. So let's say, for example, JP Morgan, okay, the biggest financial investment bank in the world. Their CEO is Jamie Dimon. Okay, he has memoirs about his business career. It's his autobiography. And I picked that up, for example, and I said, okay, if I read through this book, I can get an insight to how Jamie Dimon thinks. Maybe I'll find a golden nugget. Now, he's not going to say, here's how to become fucking profitable. But if I read this, I might be able to see the common patterns and round up the takeaways. And then what I would do then is, let's say I got a lot of value from Jamie Dimon, which I did. It was a great book. It's called Last Man Standing, as well as many others. Maybe I'll release my book list. But what I would do is I would say, okay, really fascinated with how Jamie approaches business. Obviously, I can't get him as a mentor, but how can I tap into his brain even more beyond this book? And this is something that I figured out that nobody had ever told me, which was, I would then say, okay, if I want to tap into Jamie's brain even more, well, maybe rather than going to the fucking book section of the bookstore, what if I wrote in on Google, Jamie Dimon top recommended books, or Jamie Dimon's book list? What if I could access that? If I knew the books that Jamie Dimon read, or, where he got his education, let's say he went to Harvard, for example, and he done an MBA, which I think he did. Maybe I'm wrong. But let's say that's the case. If I consumed what he recommended, and if I consumed maybe what Harvard exposed him to on their recommended reading list, well, then I could go further, okay? And what happened was, in this case, there was a book list. Let's just stick with the Jamie Dimon one. There was a book list that he issued to internal staff members. And why do you think he would issue a book list to internal staff members? Because he wants the company to be profitable. And I'd done this with so many big CEOs who had grown big companies. And this allowed me to go way beyond any fucking course, any fucking mainstream book, but tap into what really moves the needle. Now, again, it's not like a clear answer. It's not, hey, here's how to fucking grow your business. But what happens is you start to consume more books and you raise your awareness levels about business. I had a new perspective. And that new perspective is eventually what would lead me to find the answer myself. So let's go back to the start for a second. What was my goal? Well, my goal was to figure out how to build a profitable business like all these guys that I was studying. Okay, well, now with this new perspective, raised awareness levels, new information that I was equipped with, I came to my first conclusion about profits. And I realized that profits come from two places. You can grow a business two ways. Number one, you can improve the process of a business. And this is where most people focus. And this is the one that moves the needle the least. Okay, so this is everything from driving more traffic, optimizing your landing page, optimizing your funnel, closing more deals, improving the process of the business. This is where most businesses and most business consultants focus. Okay, it's the least profitable place to start, and it's where everyone puts their time, effort, and resources. Now, the second place and the second way that you can grow profits in a business is via price. Okay, think about this. If we double your price, we double your business. Now, in a perfect world, it's not that simple. Okay, but technically, it would be much easier to increase profits if we just doubled our prices, right? So I concluded then that price is worth working on. But the only issue was I had no clue what determines price. But I knew, okay, if I can figure this out, if I can figure out how to get more money for the same sale, well, this is definitely worth figuring out. And that's what I did. So what I realized then about price was price comes down to two things. So price is affected by, number one, supply and demand. So this is something that we see in bigger industries. If you look at things like our industries like the diamond industry, for example, these industries, they're based on supply and demand. If you look at oil, Okay, these are variables that in the marketing world, or more than likely the business that you're in, are out of your control. You're not going to be able to control the supply and demand of an industry like that. So that method was out of the equation. So what is the next thing that controls price? Well, the second variable that controls price is something that you can control, and that is value. Okay, you can control value because value is interpreted different by everybody. Okay, so the next question that I asked was, okay, if I can control value, I need to understand how value is made up. Okay, if I want to, be able to dictate the value that I put out to the market, I need to know what it is. And I realized that value is made up of two things. Okay, you can see how I just keep reverse engineering this stuff from the truth. And I realized value is made up of two things. Value is made up of physical value, which is the stuff that can be seen. Let's take, this mouse, for example. Okay, it has a physical value of, I don't know, let's say probably costs less than €5 or $5 to create. Right, it has a physical value, it moves around, moves the stuff on my screen here, whatever. Or, let's take a steak knife, for example. It does a good job of cutting the steak. What's it worth? Maybe a tenner. That's physical value. Now, what's the second part of value and its composition? The second part of value and its composition is the unseen value that you get when you make a purchase. This is something called intrinsic value. So, again, if we look at this Mac, for example, the physical value might be, I don't know, let's just be generous and say $200, $250. But yeah, I had to pay $2,000 to get this, okay? That's because of the intrinsic value of this. The physical value is great too, but when you put the two of these together, what this does is it gives you something. Think of it like a little equation or mathematical model. You've got physical value plus intrinsic value, and this gives you the total perceived value. And I remember when I first realized this, where value stemmed from. I thought back to an article that I read. It was about the BMW group and how the BMW group owns Rolls-Royce. And this will tie back into what I'm talking about in a second. But I remember when I realized this about total perceived value, I'd read this article a few months previous when I was going through all this stuff that I was telling you about. And it was like this jigsaw that I was trying to solve. This missing piece had just come along at the perfect time. I think not by chance, but because I was actively searching for it. So let's just recap where we are, okay, just for a second, because this is a lot. We realized that there's two ways to grow a business. You can improve the process or you can increase the price. Most people focus on improving the process and moving the needle marginally, but we know that price is the bigger variable in terms of driving profits, and it's worth working on. Now, we know that price is determined by either supply and demand, which we can't control, or it's determined by value, which we can control. And value is made up of two things. Physical value plus intrinsic value gives you total perceived value. This is the value that the customer subconsciously sees. This is the maths that they subconsciously do when they're going to buy your product or service. So where does the BMW article that I read slot into this thing? Well, let me reverse engineer it the exact way that I did and break it down for you how I saw it in my mind. So let's look at part one of this, which is the physical value. Because obviously what we want to do is we want to increase both, right? So if we look at physical value, and let's just take BMW for example. If we look at a BMW and let's say a 7 Series. A BMW 7 Series, okay, let's look at the physical features. It drives really well, okay? It has great aesthetics, great leather, gets you from A to B, has a really nice engine, looks aesthetically pleasing, and I think it goes for, let's just give it an even number of 75 to 80,000. Okay, it could be 100, but let's just say that. Now, what I want to do is, let's give it a comparison. Let's look at Rolls-Royce. Let's look at, I don't know, one of the fancy ones, a Rolls-Royce, I don't know, Ghost. Okay, I think they're similar in terms of size. Let's look at a Rolls-Royce Ghost. A Rolls-Royce Ghost, from a physical standpoint, has really nice interior. Okay, it looks aesthetically pleasing. It gets you from A to B. It has the wooden veneers on the inside, okay, but like they're obviously not worth that much money. It has the sparkly lights, they're probably not worth much money. Physical value is probably, let's say, we'll be generous and say 80 grand, okay, if not 100. Now, why, if both of them have the same physical value, okay, yeah, there's minor aesthetic differences, but if they have the same physical value, why does BMW retail for 80,000 and the Rolls-Royce Ghost retails for, let's say, 2 to 300,000? Why do you think that is? Well, we know that it's not physical value. That's not the differentiator here. What we can conclude is that because they both have the same physical value. And the funny thing about this is BMW own Rolls-Royce. That's why I'm using this example. That's why this slotted into my head at the perfect time, is because BMW own Rolls-Royce and practically they're coming off the same conveyor belt, that's just a theory, but basically the same thing, you know what I'm saying here. They're coming off the same conveyor belt. They're probably using similar parts. One is just more aesthetically pleasing. So why are people willing to pay an extra 200,000 for something that does the same job as something for 75,000, 80,000? Well, it's not the physical value. We can conclude that it's the intrinsic value. What you're actually paying for when you get a Rolls-Royce is not the physical value, the physical components, the engine, none of that shit. What you're paying for is the unseen value, the feeling of, hey, look at me, I'm successful, I'm an authority. When you pull up, people look at you. You feel like I've made it. That's what you're paying for. You're actually paying for an increase in status, and that's via the unseen value or the intrinsic value. So what we can conclude from that study and where that's slotted in, is that intrinsic value is worth more than physical value. And the crazy thing about this is it doesn't just end there. Intrinsic value does not just affect price elasticity or how much you can charge. If we take a brand like Rolex, for example, let's look at Rolex. If you go to buy a Rolex right now, okay, obviously they're high priced, they've got a lot of intrinsic value, but if you go to buy a Rolex right now from an authorized dealer, you're more than likely going to be told that you have to wait for a minimum period of 1 to 2 years. You're going to have to get on a waiting list of a long list of buyers, and when it's your turn, then you can buy. Let's look at another brand beyond Rolex. Let's look at the Italian sports cars and that market. Let's take Ferrari, for example. You walk into a Ferrari dealership. You think you're going to be able to take a Ferrari right off the lot? More than likely not. They're going to tell you to get in line, get on the waiting list like everybody else, because those cars that are waiting to come in from mainland Italy, they're already pre-sold. What I'm trying to say here is, the point that I'm trying to make is that the brands with the highest perceived value have no shortage of demand or interest. They're selling something beyond physical value. They have so much intrinsic value beyond the physical components that generates interest and demand alone. When someone makes a purchase, they're getting an increase in status, and that's what society is built on. It's built on ego, and it's built on status increases, and that's pretty desirable. Okay, the bigger the status increase, the more someone will be willing to pay for it. Think about this: you will never make a purchasing decision that is going to decrease your status. Okay, and that's what these brands have mastered, is the association of that brand, of being associated with them by wearing their clothes or having a Rolex on your wrist. Okay, that's the reason why I have this one on. Other than it being a good investment and it holds its value, it's status. And it doesn't end there when it comes to the power of intrinsic value. What intrinsic value also does, and if you look at any of these brands, if you look at Apple, Rolex, Ferrari, Rolls-Royce, there's no convincing needed. They don't try force you to buy their stuff. In fact, it's actually quite the opposite. As I said, if you go to Rolex, you can't just go in and buy. You almost have to make a case as to why they should sell to you. If we look at the iPhone 15, for example, is being released soon, or maybe it is released. Sorry, I'm not up to speed with all this stuff. But you go to the Apple store on the launch of an iPhone, what's going to happen is you're going to go in, you're already wanting to buy, okay? You've gone into the sales process already knowing, liking, and trusting them, but you go up to the checkout and you say, hey, I want to get an iPhone 15. They're more than likely going to say, hey, buddy, go way outside in the queue. Even if it's raining, they're going to say, go way outside in the queue like everybody else, and we'll sell to you when we feel like it. And I always say, if you have a sales job at a brand that has really high intrinsic value, you are going to basically make free money. You have the easiest job in the world. You could go in, you could go to work drunk, you could be terrible at sales. You wouldn't even have to try. And if you earn commission, I'm telling you, you are going to make a shit ton of money because people already want to buy the product or service. And that's what intrinsic value does, okay? It increases the efficiency of the sales process, but beyond that, it increases price elasticity, how much you can charge. You don't have to convince people, justify prices, okay? It increases demand because people want to be associated, people want the status increase, that is desirable. And thirdly, there's no convincing needed. There's no bullshit sales scripts, there's no hesitancy when the price is brought up. In fact, people come to you, and what they'll do sometimes, or in most cases with these brands, they'll give their money ahead of time. They'll say, you know what, okay, I can't get the product or service right now, don't worry about it, here's my money, put me on the waiting list. And all this is stemming from one variable. How cool is that, right? The power of intrinsic value. This fucking shit fascinates me, by the way, right? I geek out on this stuff. So you may not find this as fascinating as I do. But on that note, this is the reason you can see why I was giving these gurus, these experts, my money, is because they checked all three of those boxes. They could charge what they wanted, I would come to them, and they wouldn't have to convince me. And on that same note, that's why for so many years I was reluctant to share this information, because I was afraid with something so powerful that people would take this and use it for the wrong reasons. They would use it for unethical, disingenuous reasons, because when I implemented this stuff, it literally changed my business overnight, okay? And I was hesitant to put this out there, I think, because of how badly it had been abused, whether knowingly or unknowingly, and the impacts that had on my life. So I just want to say that if you use this information that I've just shared, and I'll explain more on how you can actually implement it in a second, but now that you understand where those things come from, you know that saying, with great power comes great responsibility? Well, that's what you have. And if you use this for disingenuous, unethical reasons to scam people, you're a con artist, I just want to say that you are a piece of shit. You are a fucking piece of shit. And if I figure out, or in fact, if anyone who is watching this, because I guess I'm not the only fucking good-hearted person in the world, if I figure out that you're using this for fucking bad, for unethical reasons, I will make sure to ruin your fucking career. I swear to God. Because we don't need that fucking shit in the world. And you might think I'm messing when I say this. I'm not fucking joking, okay? I'm in enough circles. I will make sure that your name is fucking ruined if you use this for the wrong reasons. Okay, but anyways, let's move on. I wish I had my iPad because I want to break something down for you. But I'm waiting on this cam link thing so I can rotate between the camera right here and the monitor. But what I want to do is I want to talk about one last observation that I had, which is really important, and it probably went over your head because at the time when I was kind of studying all this stuff, it was only when I was kind of going through everything that this popped into my mind. And to save you missing that, let's talk about this. So remember how I said that there's two ways to grow a business. You can either improve the process or you can increase the price. Okay, in a perfect world, if we double the price, we double the business. Therefore, we know price is worth working on. We know where it stems from. Blah, de blah, intrinsic value. Okay, we're not going to go back there. Now, the problem is, well, not the problem, but the observation is most people focus on improving the process. They're focused on optimizing the funnel, each part of it, from the traffic, the amount of appointments you get, the amount of consults that show up, the amount of people you close, okay? Each individual part, whether it be the ads, your close ratio, most people focus on that, and that only moves the needle marginally. Now, what I want to say is that stuff is not as important as you think. Don't get me wrong, they will move the needle somewhat, but they're the least profitable place to focus. Whereas if you focus on intrinsic value and raising your price, well, here's what they're missing. If you do that, as a byproduct, you will automatically improve the process, okay? By raising your intrinsic value, your cost to acquire a customer goes down, your close ratio goes up, your show up rate goes up, cash flow improves, your entire funnel has a much higher conversion rate. All that process gets improved as a byproduct naturally by focusing on your intrinsic value. So you've got two ways to grow a business. You can increase the price or you can improve the process. Intrinsic value does both of them. I'm telling you, this stuff that most people are focusing on, the funnel hacks, the websites, the call scripts, all this stupid shit, that's not really that important, because if you work on this key variable, all that stuff just happens. And I know this because in the early days of my consultancy, we didn't even have a website, but we were able to experience significant growth because people didn't care. When your intrinsic value is so high, people don't really give a shit. They say, hey, I just want to work with you. How can I pay you? That's the power of this. Like, think for example, there's probably some stuff that you've bought before that you really wanted. You didn't care who you had to speak to or some fucking website. You just wanted to go direct to the source and say, hey, listen, I need this right now. Take my money. Right? I bet you have. Think about it. This applies to a lot of things. This is why I wish I had my iPad. So just do this in your mind for a second, because I don't have it. Let's draw a square. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to draw a square in your mind, and at the top of the square, put a dotted circle, and we're gonna put profits just above that. Now, on the left and the right side of the square, what I want you to do is, on the left, I want you to put increase price, and on the right, I want you to put improve process. So we've got profits up the top, we've got price on the left, and improve process on the right. Now down the bottom side of the square, I want you to put intrinsic value. And what I want you to see is, if you focus on the bottom cog, think of it like a system. If you focus on the cog at the bottom, which is intrinsic value, by turning this one on, the price automatically gets increased and the process automatically improves. They both run up to the same thing at the top, which is profits. Now, I hope I did a good job of explaining that, and I hope you understand, because when I fucking discovered this, it was like discovering fire for the first time. And by you knowing this, you're more educated on the topic of profitability compared to most business owners and most business consultants. Now, I'm guessing if you're anything like me, the next question that you have is, how the fuck do I raise my intrinsic value? How the fuck do I raise the intrinsic value for my business? Now, here's what I want you to know. Remember, I said that intrinsic value is one component of total perceived value. And there's a key word that I mentioned there, perceived value. It's based on perception. And the beauty about perception is you can change it in an instant. It's instantaneous. And that topic in itself of perception, we could talk about that for hours. But I want to say that when I discovered this again, it was like discovering fire for the first time, okay? Because I had no demand. I couldn't fucking close deals. I was charging bottom of the barrel prices, poverty pricing, and essentially I was positioned as the worst thing you could be in the market, which is a commodity. And again, if you're taking notes, I mentioned another key word there, positioned. That's how you control perception. You carve out a position in the market. Okay, I'm giving you a lot of fucking fire here. So you control intrinsic value through positioning in the market. And that's what I went and did. I had to change my position in the market. And when I did, which was almost instantly after I fucking came to this conclusion, the trajectory and the course of my business and my career as an entrepreneur changed immediately. And I mean immediately. This is how fast that this can happen. I went from struggling to having clients come to me wanting to pay me money. This is like a fucking dream come true. And at first, actually, I still had a lot of the imposter syndrome. I still didn't feel comfortable charging as much money. This was something that I had to get over because people were now viewing me as an authority. And the crazy thing is, when you're viewed as an authority, what happens is people automatically assume that it's going to be expensive. So if you charge a low price and they come into your funnel and they go, they see you as this figure of authority, they get to checkout and it's, very cheap. They're like, something's not right here. This doesn't equate. Why is he selling this for cheap? I'm buying this more so because it's expensive, because I want to be associated with it. Does that make sense? So as a result of that, I was forced to raise my prices. And in fact, our retainer went from €500 minimum. We 6 times it. Okay, if I'm good at maths, that will be 3,000, right? 5, 10, 15. Yeah, okay, so we put it to 3,000. That was our minimum retainer. So I was forced to do that because the intrinsic value went so high and it couldn't be any lower because it just wouldn't make sense. And fortunately enough, I want to re-emphasize this point, lucky we could back up what we were saying we could do, okay? But there was no more hesitancy, no more sales scripts. But again, we were able to provide what we said we could do for the business. If you can't do that, don't fucking use this shit. This information that I've given you right now, and I'm not lying when I say this, I'm genuinely not. And I always get goosebumps when I talk about this shit. But this is the fucking information that literally changed my career, okay? From that moment on, no more poverty pricing anymore. I was fucking done with that. I was done with relying on convincing people, working myself to the bone, getting nothing from it, giving the gurus all my fucking money, going in circles, never able to get people to take me serious or build a fucking business that I wanted. I was done with that. I was done with the funnel hacks. I was done with the having to learn sales, having to be a great copywriter, having to run ads, all these fucking things that they kept telling me to do that I would do, and people still wouldn't take me serious. I still couldn't get the outcome that I wanted. And this resulted in me hating the whole industry. I fucking resented marketing. I didn't even like it anymore. And that's because I was positioned as a commodity in the marketplace. And that's the fucking worst thing you can be, is just another. And being positioned as just another crushed my drive even more. I just wanted to quit. But thankfully I didn't. I'm grateful to my younger self that I kept going. And the second thing is, I'm grateful that I fucking reverse engineered this and found it out for myself. I put my brain to work. I used first principle style thinking to figure out the importance of intrinsic value. And then I manufactured and crafted a new position on the premise that I could actually back up what I was saying, because I just couldn't get people to listen to me. And thankfully I did that, and that's what I did. I deployed a new position in the marketplace, and that's what allowed me to get certainty and control and profitability in my business. And overall, on the topic of positioning and intrinsic value, this only makes up about 20% of the topic of positioning, which is why I can't stay talking about this forever. But this is actually the second pillar in the Core 4 system that we developed at our consultancy. And what the Core 4 system is, if you don't know, it's a theory and marketing strategy that makes the assumption, and it's built on the assumption, that the act of making a purchasing decision is a universal process. Because if we define it as a process, then that means it can be reverse engineered to its fundamental parts, and we can repeat it and construct it like clockwork. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Because that's exactly what it does. It takes the guesswork out of marketing and it puts the predictability back into it. It's designed to take someone from a point of no interest, not knowing who you are or anything about your brand, to creating such an intense desire to buy that they come back time and time again. No bullshit tactics or selling needed. They come and they want to buy. You don't have to try sell. And I believe it's the key to growing any great business or idea. And that's why I'm sharing it, because the world needs more great entrepreneurs who are self-sufficient at marketing to make the world a better place. So that's why I'm sharing it. And I just want to take a moment to thank you guys as well, because this content stuff is not like natural to me. To be honest, I won't lie, I wasn't gonna continue doing it. I was wondering if it was worth it. I didn't realize how many people I was impacting with this stuff, and how many you guys are getting value. And some of the people who have reached out to me, the messages have just been phenomenal. And it's really made me realize that this isn't about me, it's about you guys. And that's why I'm going to continue to doing it, because I want to see you guys do better, whether it be with health, performance, marketing, business, and just overall make the world a better place. I'm an introvert by nature. Being in front of the camera is not something I enjoy, but I will force myself to do it for you guys. And I want to say as well that your support, your messages, your comments, it really does mean the world, and it's actually what is keeping me going doing this. So this is just my way of saying thanks, and I will keep going. So yeah, that is that. What you're best off doing now is using this information that you've got, put it to good use, don't put it to bad use. This has the power to change the trajectory of your business. This has the power to increase demand, increase price, increase how easy you get those deals over the line in an instant. But with that said, with great power comes great responsibility. I'm sure you can see the power of this. And one thing I would ask is that you take a stance against unethical business practices. The con artists, the scammers, people who use deception to take money from other people. We don't need any more of that in the world, and we need to take a hard stance against it. So you would be doing me a favor, and I'll make sure of it, but I need your guys' help too. If you ever see that type of shit, to call people out. That's why I'm doing all this, is because I want you guys to be self-sufficient at marketing. I don't want you to have to go and keep spending money over and over again like I did. I want you to have your own strategy, to be able to see a proven path and say, okay, I have this business or I have this idea. I can clearly get it to market using something like the Core 4 strategy. That's why I'm doing this. And I always say, if you don't understand the fundamentals of where you're going, how are you ever going to lead? If you don't understand the strategy, you'll never have direction. So everything that I put out there in my content is designed to make you self-sufficient. And you'd be surprised, man, if you put your brain to work. You're much smarter than you think. I always say this. But yeah, make sure to put this to good use. This is the shit that changed my life. And yeah, until next time.